Hello and welcome to Console Cowboys. So in the previous videos, we've been talking about how to get really good at learning a subject, and we also talked about scheduling your day in order to get those things in order so that you can get everything done and keep acquiring those skill sets. But today I wanted to talk about what are we actually studying? How do we break down what we need to learn? And the way I look at this is kind of twofold. What is your purpose for your learning? Is it because you're trying to get a job, and how do we do that? Or is it because you're just looking to get really good at something and dive into something new for either yourself, your research, or a different job path, right? So the first thing we'll jump into here is jobs, right? So if you're looking for a particular job, what you really need to do is you need to start taking time looking at job postings, right? Go on LinkedIn and start looking at the common factors, right? So if you're looking at web application security, what certifications do they want? What skill sets do they want? Like a lot of web application penetration testing stuff will be looking for, usage of burp or source code review or something of that nature, OWASP top 10, et cetera, et cetera. And that'll sort of key you into particular points of interest that you can look into further and start building the skill sets that places are looking for that are common across all the jobs. Like when you compile them all together, you should see the overlapping things, and those would be the most important thing to focus on first. Like for example, network penetration testing, what you're going to notice is most every single one wants an OSCP. So maybe you should start looking at that, but don't look at the context of I'm getting a certification. Look at the context of what does that entail? What skill sets am I going to learn? And where is that a good starting point? Because an OSCP is just a certification. People think it's the gold standard, but really it's just the starting point of your journey and learning various skill sets that then you're going to dive in deeper to the ones you want to learn more. And then we start scheduling your day based on the skill sets you need. So before we hop into the specifics of looking at job posts and skill sets and mapping things out, I wanted to give a story that really encapsulates everything we're going to do today and how it can work for you. Now the story is, back in 2014, I was in Thailand training Muay Thai and fighting. And I met a lot of interesting people, one of which was this guy, Thomas. Now Thomas was traveling the world because he just didn't want to go home. So he was in Australia doing a farming job. And then he was in Thailand training to fight. And then he was out in South America teaching English. And he finally gets to the United States after I was back, and he hits me up. He's like, hey, can I stay at your place because I've always wanted to go to San Diego? I'm like, no problem, crash, all cool. And so we get in this conversation of like what he's doing and what he wants to do with his life. And it just basically came down to the fact, I was like, so where do you want to go? And he's like, well, I just don't want to go back to Holland. I'm like, well, where do you actually want to go? He's like, I think I want to go to Malta. I'm like, okay, Malta, interesting. I'm like, well, like, how do we get you there? He's like, well, I have a marketing degree, but it's kind of irrelevant now because people are doing online marketing with social media. They're making WordPress pages at the time. They're doing SEO. They're doing all this, basically a lot of just online stuff that he didn't know how to do because he had a traditional marketing degree. I'm like, this is not a problem. We can just learn this. I'm like, how long do you have? He's like, I got 6 weeks till I get out of the country and they boot me out for not having a visa. I'm like, okay, perfect. We can do this. So what we did was I downloaded a bunch of courses and learning material based on looking at job posts specifically in Malta. What are they looking at? What are all the overlapping skill sets that every marketing place wants in Malta? We grabbed all those courses. I sat him down for 2 hours every morning. And then we went out, we did some stuff. And in the afternoon, after learning stuff, he'd sit there and do labs for 2 hours. He did this every day. And what happened was he got to the job interviews. We got him 5 job interviews. And it was a breath of fresh air for these companies because they'd been talking to people who kind of sort of knew the things, but they couldn't implement it. They couldn't talk to it. They didn't have all the lingo down, but Thomas had been living this every day for 6 weeks. He could talk forward and backwards with confidence as if he's been doing it for the last 5 years because he went and he learned the things instead of BSing. So what ended up happening was he got 5 job offers. And out of those 5 job offers, he then plotted them against each other to get the highest salary Once he did that, we checked the salary, and it was well above and beyond what he needed to live in Malta. And where is he today? Living in Malta since 2015, doing the exact same skill sets that he self-learned from going through the process that we're going to do today of figuring out what these places want, what are the overlapping skill sets, and then focusing down our learning sets based on those things. So let's hop in and take a look at some stuff on LinkedIn and some jobs and kind of go through a little bit of the process and then map out some skill set stuff and how you utilize those. All right, so I popped open a few random job postings, and let's take a look at each one. They're all penetration testing and find the overlapping themes, which will help us focus in on what we need to learn if we were looking for a job in that first scenario. So let's see, first one we have, it's a smaller company, 11 to 50 employees. And we want to look at, what they're looking for. So they're looking for junior, mid, senior, and principal. So that's pretty much all levels. And then we'll roll through, okay, our duties, application security, web, mobile, web services, fat clients or thick clients, network pen testing, external, internal, wireless, red teaming, social engineering. So the first thing you're going to notice is that they don't necessarily know what they want. They need people that do everything for all levels. So you don't need to know all of these things. You just need to know one of these things, be really good at them, and maybe a second one, and have some familiarity with pen testing. So don't get, thinking that, I need to know everything in this listing. You really don't. They don't even know what they want. So that's the first thing I see here. The next thing I see here is they want somebody who's done a pen test before. They don't want like a super junior person more likely, because they want familiarity with kickoff calls, report delivery, wrap up meetings. So you've dealt with clients and you've done these things. And we're going to cover these things in a future video where we roll through the whole pen test process and different issues with clients. So you'll get a little familiarity there. Now, they also want you to do some non-pen test things like enhancing methodologies. So if that's not your thing, you want to be upfront about that. And you can roll through and check out all these others. The other things we want to look for outside of, what the job duties are specific skill stuff and certifications. So you want to look up, what are the job duties, what are the certifications, and, what are the skill sets that they're looking for. Now, the certifications are OSCP, OSCE, so those are offensive security, SANS, but it's non-specific, and CREST. That is a European one, so if you're not in Europe, it probably does not matter. And then it looks like some defensive stuff, blue team. And then I see a whole section here for Burp Suite. So that is what I would focus in on, because these are generic. This is specific. So specifically looking for a Burp Suite expert. And this will give you some categories to learn. So writing extender plugins, writing login macros. So that means you need to know how to code and script things. I believe you can do that with both Python and Java. So something to think about there. Typical repeater and scanner use within Burp Suite. So really just understanding how Burp Suite works and be able to utilize it because it's a main tool set for web. And then be able to script. Now, specific scripting skills, we have PHP, Perl, Python, Bash, etc. So Python can be used for, the different plugins. So it might be something to think about. And familiarity with the others will also help you. So now what we want to do is we kind of want to look at what the overlapping things are on other pen test positions. So let's look at another one here. We have another, generic pen test job. And we look through and we're going to look for familiarities. So we have web apps. We have infrastructure, which would be network pen testing, web apps, web APIs. So same thing again. And then they get a little bit specific this time. So they want single sign-on testing of SAML and OAuth. So authentication testing for web and other web technologies. They also want programming and scripting experience. Again, we see Python again, then Go and PowerShell. PowerShell usually within internal, network pen testing is where we would use this. Also AD and Kuberos. So they're looking for more of that like new school red team stuff with AD. That's the new school verbiage for red team these days is all AD stuff and a lot of PowerShell stuff. And then they're also looking for certs. So we have our OSCE again, our OSCP again, something to think about, a CISSP, and then some specific SAN certs, GPEN, GWAP, GXPN. These are all network things except for a GWAP. So I would think, they're definitely looking for a net pen tester probably. And then they also are specific web, so they're looking for a web person too. So they're looking for both web and network pen testing, and they do give some specifics. So we might want to write these down if we don't know what these are and we don't know how to test them. And then our overlapping things here are Python and our OSCP, OSCE. Something to think about in here. Now, I don't specifically see tool sets, I don't think. Oh yeah, we do. Burp Suite again, Nessus, and Metasploit. Okay, so there's our tool sets. And that's about it for this post. So we see some overlapping stuff. Let's check out another one. Now, what overlaps in here? So I'm seeing scripting again. I see Python again. So that's the third time we've seen Python, I believe. So that's definitely something you should focus on, as well as I saw PHP and some other ones. So you can look into those as well. And then I do see Burp Suite here again. So another thing, we've seen Burp Suite everywhere. It's one of the main tool sets. It's something you gotta get good at. And our scripting. And if we look at our certifications, we have GPEN again, GWAP. So those are the SANS one. If you got funding for that, might be something to look at. We see a CISSP again. However, with CISSP, unless you're doing government work, it really doesn't matter too much. It's just required by them. So I wouldn't focus on it too much. You see your OSCE again, OSCP again. So we're seeing that for the third time. So what does that tell you? Might be a certification you want to look at. And then in experience scripting languages, preferably Python. So there's Python a fourth time, twice within this, right? So what else do we have in here? They want somebody who can mentor junior team members. So that's something to think about. Do you actually want to mentor people? If not, you want to be upfront with that. If you really do want to mentor people, this might be a good job for you. Develop exploit chains and manual penetration testing. So they're looking for a technical person, and that's something to look at in these job things as well. Do they want somebody with doing a lot of busy work and a little bit of pen testing? Or do they want somebody who primarily pen tests and then maybe does some mentoring and some other stuff? You got to figure out where you fit, and then you want to find the overlapping skill sets. So to recap, we need Burp Suite, we need scripting, Python popped up a bunch, we need, what else do we need? We need OSCP probably, and then there's some other specifics with OAuth and whatnot, and specific things within Burp we can key in since those things are popping up. Web's popping up, so there's some stuff in there. Burp Suite's popping up, some stuff in there. And scripting, and we have Python, etc. So you want to focus on those overlapping things. And we can go through, like 20 of these things and really find all the commonalities, and that's what we want to focus on. So that's just a quick kind of overview of how we would do that. Now let's take a look at actually scheduling out our skill sets and how we would do that, and then tie some of these things together from the previous videos and then this video. So once we've went through those job postings, or we're just trying to, figure out what we want to do each day in a specific subject matter, we need to break those down and write out what all of those things are. So let's say we were looking through the job postings and we decided we're going to learn application security because it came up a bunch. Well, under application security, we have other subcategories. We have web, we have APIs, source code review, thick clients. You even have stuff like blockchain, Web3, mobile, or exploitation even. So I just wrote down a few here. So what did we notice in web? Well, we noticed that people want burp. They want a lot of burp. They also want scripting. Specifically, we saw Python a lot. We also saw PHP, some .NET, Ruby, etc. But Python came up the most, so it's probably the best option, as well as we can write burp plugins with that, and we can script out stuff to talk with APIs quite easily. Right, and then we saw some specific things in there, like specific things under burp for writing plugins, etc., and using repeater. And we got to think where we can learn that. We can go to Portswigger Academy because they make burp, and we can start working through labs there. And we also saw stuff like authentication testing with OAuth and SAML. Well, Burp Swigger Academy also has OAuth Labs, and they have OAuth Learning Path, so we can utilize that. Burp for SAML also has SAML Raider, which will parse all of those out and allow you to exploit things, so we can go from there with that. Then we saw various certifications like GWAPT, and we even saw OSCP that was repeated a bunch, and it actually does have some web stuff in there. So that gives us kind of some stuff to learn. So now from that, we can take our day and say, okay, well, I'm going to go to Portswigger Academy. I'm going to play with their OAuth Labs for maybe a month and just really dial that in while learning, the Burp tool. And then maybe I'm going to start trying to script some stuff in there. Maybe I'll script something that takes the SAML stuff and decodes it all and automates an attack or what have you. And if I need a little bit of, direct path, maybe I can start on this GWAPT or this OSCP and work through that and then dive into the areas that interest me the most under that also utilize these skill sets. Like in OSCP, you're going to write exploits and you can use Python for that. Or you can create your own tools to enumerate subdomains, et cetera, right? And you can choose one of those things and add them to your daily thing that you're going to work on and keep doing it until you exhaust the subject matter, then hop into the other familiar things that repeated, right? We also saw, there was some APIs listed, but they weren't specific with it. However, there's a really good book called like Hacking APIs that just came out. It's phenomenal. It at least give you a path. And then within there, we know we need to learn REST. We need to learn SOAP. We need to learn GraphQL, right? Those are the main languages for API. So we can focus on those. And throughout both web and API, we can hit up, the Portswigger Academy, Pentester Labs, or we can download the damn vulnerable applications. I believe there's a damn vulnerable REST, damn vulnerable SOAP, damn vulnerable GraphQL, etc. There might even be a damn vulnerable SAML, I'm not really sure. But there's a lot of those, and from those, we can start making labs out of those and say, okay, this week I'm going to work only on GraphQL. I'm going to read it in the Hacking APIs book. I'm going to download the damn vulnerable GraphQL. I'm going to rip through that. I'm going to find all the other lab stuff that I can do that and rip through that. Maybe I'm going to make a whole month out of it. Then I'm going to learn to code GraphQL applications and interact with GraphQL databases and really get a better feel for how that works. And that'll work perfectly. And then we can tie that directly into our source code review over here. And we can start doing, okay, well, I want to learn source code review. Well, we have these damn vulnerable applications. We know they're vulnerable. We know they have issues. So we can then source SCR damn vulnerable. So we can download damn vulnerable REST, or we can even specific things. They have damn vulnerable Rails, damn vulnerable Django. And we're like, okay, let's download damn vulnerable Django because we're familiar with Python. Let's do a source code review and we'll find all the vulnerabilities and then we will implement the fixes on them, right? So we could also, another way to do it is find vulnerabilities by testing it for the web app stuff, like directly just test it dynamically with Burp and all of that. And then we can go through and find the source code within those that relate to those vulnerabilities, which will help us. We know the vulnerability exists. We can then find it in the source code, and then we can implement the fixes and then try to hack it again and see if our fix worked. Now, if we don't know much about Django, well, let's now add in a Django course. And what is that going to be? Well, we want a course that like lets us code a bunch of projects. We'll code a whole bunch of these projects, and then we'll go through and we'll try to hack our projects that we coded because more than likely they're vulnerable. And then we'll say, okay, let's now implement the fixes. And then let's say, okay, well, we're learning OAuth. Let's implement OAuth into our Django project for the authentication. And then let's try to hack that. And we just created our own lab. You see how we're coming up with all these tasks to do, and these are all our learning opportunities. It's not get the certification and do all the things and then focus on that. It's like there's so much to do, and all of these things tie in together. And then there's also some more niche subjects. You have your thick clients, you have your Web3. Now, Web3 is very specific, and I have a lot of blockchain stuff you can check on the channel. But it's going to be learning other scripting languages like Solidity. You can also do some Python stuff with it. knowing JavaScript. So again, heavy coding. You got to learn to code, or at least understand code and be able to write some scripting. You don't have to be a great software engineer, but you need to know how to script stuff and understand this stuff at a basic level. And then thick clients, if you were to get into something like that, there's like a damn vulnerable thick client that'll walk you through the process. But the problem is there's a lot of stuff under thick clients, subcategories. You got reverse engineering, you got packet analysis, you got all kinds of stuff. So you need to know how to do all those things and then make all those subcategories under there and then dive into those. Like if you were learning reverse engineering, maybe check out Nightmare. It's a whole course that goes through reverse engineering using Ghidra and IDA and going through CTFs as you go through and learning exploitation and then bringing that back into thick client. But that could literally take you a whole year to go through Nightmare, right? And packet analysis. So you saw all the SANS certs they want. Well, you can do SANS 503, learn a lot about packet analysis and go from there. So you get the kind of the point is that once you find those overlapping subjects, you can put them into the categories. Which category are you most interested in? What are the things that are there? And then break those down into your day, which will give you the things that you need to do. And then you can cycle that out to your 50% lab, 50% learning, or 75% lab, etc. So once that's all good to go, now you're basically, you know exactly what you need to do and you can get there. So hopefully that is all useful for you. I just want to go through that before we hop into pen test processes and move away from the learning, just to give you perspective of how to go from nothing to learning what to learn by knowing what people want, taking what is most of interest to you in that area, and then breaking it down a little bit so that you know what to study, what to do for labs. So hopefully this is all interest to you, and we'll look at some other things next week, specifically now on pen test processes, as well as problems within those and dealing with clients with those and proper procedures.